Friends, pray with me. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations in all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. Amen. When we lose something of great value, finding it brings great joy. I could ask all of you the same question about something that you've lost that was so important to you. And something probably comes to mind. The things we lose that leave almost like a hole inside that we can't fill. Of course, now I lose a lot of things. Retracing my steps, looking for my keys, my wallet. I don't know what corners of the dark web that my important emails go to. But when I find these things, I don't always rejoice because it feels like I'm losing my mind. And some losses can't be replaced, which is why it's so important to have joy when we do find something, when something is restored. As a child, I had two small turtles, Lancelot and Elaine. They were named after swans at Lake Laverne, but that's another story. And they lived in a plastic terrarium in my room. And you may not think that turtles do a whole lot, but I liked watching them pull into their shells and then peek out again. And they had this kind of like a handicap ramp in their terrarium that went up to where their food was so it didn't get wet. And I loved to feed them and watch them race up the terrarium to get it. And I just took a lot of comfort in these slow creatures. Maybe because I wasn't so fast. I was a slow runner growing up, and I liked that tortoise and the hare, that these slow creatures had survived for millions of years. And one day Lancelot disappeared. My mother wondered if I had left him out playing with him, lining up toy soldiers to see if he'd knock them down. Maybe I'd forgotten him. But I said, I watched them sometimes climb on top of each other. He might have escaped. And that was my hope. But after about 24 hours, I lost hope. It didn't sound like he was coming back. I felt terrible. Losing my pet, so sad for Elaine by herself in the terrarium. I had to go to school and I cried. And then a day later, my mom was dusting under the bed, and there was a little dust ball slowly moving against the direction of the wind, and the lost was found. It was Lancelot. And when I came home, there was great rejoicing. The lost was found, and my little world felt together again. Which is the point, because there's really three parables about lost and found. We could add the prodigal son as the next story. And the outcome is not only joy, it's about the restoration. One sheep restores the flock. One coin completes the necklace. One lost son restores the family. Now, Jesus had reason for telling these parables. It says in the beginning that religious leaders were criticizing. He was eating with tax collectors, imagine. And sinners, and worse, he welcomed them. In fact, the original word said he was eagerly welcoming these kind of people. And so he was criticized, and Jesus answered, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. Okay, that was Billy Joel. I was just testing you, and only the good die young, and I'd rather laugh with the sinners. Anyway. But here's what Jesus understood. when you're criticized and someone's demonizing you, it doesn't do any good to get all defensive and shout back at them. And this is why he told parables. Because parables can help us release the grip that ideology has on our opinions. Parables create a different conversation. They can bring us into exploring our values rather than just a knee-jerk reaction to people. And so instead of Jesus saying, "We should welcome everyone. What's the matter with you?" He says, let's talk about a shepherd. He lost a sheep. No one wants to lose a sheep. Even one little lamb out of 100, that's going to cut into your profit margins. But seriously, would you leave the 99 sheep to go get the one? Would you risk them? A predator might come and you might lose even more sheep. So are you going to take the risk of leaving them undefended to go find the one sheep? Is it worth it? Jesus gives us a little commentary in verse 7. He said, "I tell you, in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than the 99 righteous who do not. More one sinner than all of us put together in the room this morning." Jesus is telling us what God is like. That divine love searches when we go astray, even when it's risky. And I think Jesus kind of gets crowd psychology too. You might go out and stand up for that one person, that person that's on the margins, maybe not so popular, and the 99 aren't always going to applaud you for that. In fact, when we get to the parable of the prodigal son, the older brother, the dutiful one who stayed home and did everything right, he is distressed when his father is joyful about the ne'er-do-well son who took off, right? Now, Jesus could have stopped with just telling this one parable about a lost sheep. But then he tells a second parable. A woman loses a coin. She too diligently searches the entire house to find this coin. We see the joy of finding it. She goes out and she celebrates with her neighbors. But what does finding this 1 in 10 silver coin add to what Jesus is saying? In context, women of that day often wore a headband made of 10 coins. It might have been her dowry. And so to lose one coin, it's not just like, okay, so you've lost 10% of your wealth, you've lost this piece of the set. It's not complete anymore. And that necklace, it symbolized hope. It symbolized this sense of belonging and security. And so to lose it, the set is broken. When we alienate ourselves from one another, the set is broken. Some people try to find community by creating us and them so they know who belongs and who doesn't. But what Jesus is saying is that's not community, that's breaking what belongs together. And since we're celebrating seasons of creation this month, I was thinking about these parables in terms of also our relationship with our environment, with all living creatures on this earth. We're living in a time of great loss. Some call it a mass extinction moment, as entire species are vanishing like sheep being scattered from the flock. And I think these parables remind us that what is lost is not disposable, but precious. worth searching for, worth restoring, worth rejoicing over when even one life is renewed. And there are hopeful stories of lost and found when we think about the environment. One of the most hopeful stories is a local story in our own backyard. Rachel Carson lived on Southport. She played a crucial role in eliminating the chemicals that were killing off birds. And I think what she wrote was really brilliant. You see, she could have written an essay that said, the dangers of DDT to eggshells of eagles and osprey. Instead, she titled her book, Silent Spring. And she asked readers at the beginning to imagine a kind of mourning. She writes, over increasingly large areas of the United States, spring now comes unheralded by the return of birds. The early mornings strangely silent, where once they were filled with the beauty of bird song. What Carson did so well is to call us back to joy and wonder, to remind us that we all belong to this cycle of life, and we're all diminished when we've lost a species. And just in her title, she evokes that sense of, you've sat outside, listened to the birds, maybe for hours, watching them at the feeder. Maybe you saw an eagle fly by overhead, so majestic with its great wings. Carson wrote later, there is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature. The assurance that dawn comes after the night and spring after winter, and that the human soul needs wonder of creation, and the air we breathe, and the water we drink, and the good soil that brings forth our food. The earth really is the economy. No earth, no economy. And what I think is so important about what Rachel Carson did is she reminds us what motivates people is not threats and dire warnings and talking about the apocalypse, but it's interconnections. It's joy. It's wonder. It's the desire for the sense that we live in an awesome world and that life is amazing and wondrous, even if mysterious, that wants us to restore the common good. And yes, I'm deeply distressed about what's happening with climate change. Sometimes I'm angry at the indifference or the outright destruction of things in nature. But I'm also hopeful. I'm hopeful because we have shown in the past we do have the ability to make things better. 10 years after Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, the Clean Water Act was passed, along with the Clean Air Act. The Environmental Protection Agency was created, and some say that Silent Spring was like the Uncle Tom's Cabin of the environmental movement, that it galvanized people to recognize how important this is. And we changed. Do you remember what air quality was like in the 60s? We had rivers on fire. We've come a long way. Now, I want to go back for a moment to that little boy with the turtle, me. Now, I had not read Rachel Carson in elementary school, but my mom had. I knew turtles were an endangered species. So that's part of why my little heart was so forlorn by losing my one little turtle, right? And I also, I had a t-shirt, and it said, DDT bugs me, and it had a little hornet bug on it, right? And I was thinking about that, and actually this week I tried to see if that t-shirt had been mass produced, and I was looking for a copy of it. And you know what I found instead? I found a t-shirt designed by the chemical company that made DDT, and it read, "DDT is good for me." And it had dancing cows and dancing apples and a housewife with her apron on. And it was part of a corporate campaign to say that, you know, these chemicals were great for agricultural production. And it made me realize what Rachel Carson was up against when she wrote the book. And she really said, but at what cost? You know, is the convenience or the productivity or the profit worth the destruction of the underlying? And I also realized that while I was wearing my little DDT Bugs Me shirt, my father was a crop duster. And he was spraying fields with pesticides, and my daily bread came from that work. I grew up with a lot of cognitive dissonance. Don't we all, though? Aren't we all tied into a system that's hard to get out of, and that just being self-righteous about things isn't going to bring change? We're all caught up in an economy that creates imbalances in nature and destroys the source of life. And to unravel ourselves from it, it's not easy. One person alone can't do it. And getting through this dilemma, it's going to require different kinds of thinking than what got us here in the first place. Now, we made a lot of progress by creating environmental law and the EPA, but it didn't solve things. It didn't alter the economic forces that devalue the earth. It doesn't change our relationship with the species that we live with, and that's going to require something more from us. We're going to have to find the energy, the diligence that we see in the searchers, the shepherd, the woman who lost her coin, the diligence to go out and restore what is possible, and to create a community that celebrates the joy of all creation. Imagine this. What if we got it right? Can't we? Can't we get things right? You know, Jesus' parables don't end with loss, but in rejoicing. And God doesn't give up. Not on one sheep, not on one coin, or one lost person, or one fragile piece of creation. When the lost is restored, heaven breaks out in song, and paradise may be wounded, but it is not gone. By God's grace, paradise can be found again and made whole. And when we join together in God's search, in God's restoration, and lift our voices in joy, all of creation sings with us. Amen.